Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on something, a research article actually that I found super interesting.
Oh, cool.
It's called The Rise of Generative AI, Unraveling the Knowns and Unknowns. It was published this year in the Human Resource Management Journal.
Okay.
Now I know, you're probably thinking AI again. We've all heard so much about it already.
Yeah.
But this is a little different. This isn't just like a general overview of what AI is. This article is looking at a very specific type of AI, generative AI, and how it's going to completely transform the workplace. And we've got the perfect person to break it all down for us, our expert on all things future of work.
Hey, happy to be here. It's an exciting topic for sure.
So this article, The Rise of Generative AI, I was really intrigued when I saw it because it brought in perspectives from all different areas. Like it wasn't just tech people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's actually what I found so fascinating about it. There were 11 different scholars who contributed to this paper.
Mm-hmm.
And they all come from these really diverse backgrounds: historians, economists, HR specialists.
11. Wow.
So they're really able to paint a comprehensive picture of what a generative AI-powered workplace might actually look like, from all these different angles.
Okay, so before we get too far, for those who maybe aren't as familiar with this, can you give us a quick definition of what generative AI is?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important to define it because it has become a bit of a buzzword.
Yeah.
You hear it everywhere. But basically, the simplest way to think about it is generative AI is a type of AI that can create new content.
Okay.
So it's not just recognizing patterns, which is what we often think of with traditional AI.
Right.
This is actually able to create things. So things like text, it can generate text, code, even music.
Okay.
And I think the most, well-known example of this is ChatGPT.
ChatGPT, yeah. The AI that like everyone's talking about. It can write poems, it can like compose music. I even saw an article where it helps someone like write a business plan, which I thought was pretty crazy.
It is wild. And that's what I mean. Like, it just kind of came out of nowhere, it feels like, to the public at least.
Yeah.
So ChatGPT was only released to the public in late 2022.
Oh, wow. So really recently.
Yeah, super recent.
Yeah.
And it's already sparked this huge wave of innovation and investment, which is super interesting to see. But this article, they're not just focusing on the creative potential, which is definitely there, but really how this technology is going to impact the future of work and how we manage talent.
So speaking of the future of work, how does this article approach kind of the impact of generative AI on like business strategy? Because it feels like every company right now is just trying to figure out how to incorporate AI.
Yeah, for sure. And the article really tackles this head on, which I thought was super interesting. It presents two kind of contrasting viewpoints that they pull from business history and something called the resource-based view, which we'll talk about. But essentially, it asks this question of like, will generative AI be a truly disruptive force? Like, think of something like the steam engine, right? Or is it just going to be like a hyped up fad that will eventually fizzle out?
So are we talking about a complete shift in how we do business, or is this just another tech trend that will eventually be replaced by the next, shiny new thing?
Exactly. And the article suggests that we can look to history for guidance. So, thinking back, have we always been accurate in predicting how these new technologies are going to impact work?
Good point. Yeah.
And business models?
Yeah.
And the authors of the article, they argued that by looking at past successes and failures, we can learn some really valuable lessons for how this might play out.
Yeah.
With generative AI.
Love that. I love that approach. Looking to history, because so often it repeats itself, right? So what's the other perspective that they present?
So the other one is the resource-based view, or RBV. So this is a framework that's often used in strategic management.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic idea behind it is that a company's competitive advantage comes from its unique resources and capabilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what the article asks, and this is where it gets really interesting, is will generative AI make those traditional competitive advantages obsolete?
Oh. So if everyone has access to these powerful AI tools, are we all just going to be the same? And how do companies differentiate themselves?
Oh, exactly. And that's, potentially one outcome that businesses need to be thinking about very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But the article does introduce this alternative view, which I thought was also interesting, called the open resource-based view.
Okay.
And this suggests that, maybe the wide availability of AI can actually create new opportunities and benefits for everyone. So it's not just about individual companies winning or losing.
So instead of it being like this weapon that everyone's using to compete, it
Yeah.
could actually be this tool for collaboration and maybe even like shared progress.
Yeah, exactly. And so the open resource-based view really emphasizes the potential for AI to create value for an entire industry or even for society as a whole.
That is compelling.
Like a very optimistic outlook.
It is. It is.
But one that I think is, at least worth considering.
Okay. So we've got these different perspectives on kind of the strategic implications. What about the day-to-day realities of the workplace? How will generative AI actually impact how we manage people and teams and entire organizations?
Yeah. So that's where I think this article really gets into the nitty-gritty, right?
Yeah.
So it dives into some very specific areas of human resource management. And I think one of the most obvious places where we'll see change is in employee relations, well-being, and engagement. And really a key player here is going to be chatbots.
Chatbots. Oh, yeah. Seems like those are popping up everywhere. I feel like I even used one to order a pizza the other night.
Right. Totally. I mean, they are everywhere.
Yeah.
But in an HR context, the article suggests that AI chatbots, so think of ChatGPT, could automate a lot of those, day-to-day routine HR tasks. So answering questions, employees have about benefits or policies or even onboarding procedures, all those things that HR departments have to deal with.
Right.
So this could really free up HR professionals to work on those more strategic initiatives. And it also, could improve access to information for employees.
So increased efficiency, accessibility sounds great, but I do wonder about the human element. Are employees really going to feel comfortable, going to a chatbot, especially when it comes to these more sensitive topics, like maybe their mental health or a conflict they're having in the workplace?
Yeah.
Will they feel comfortable confiding in a chatbot?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid concern, and it's something that HR professionals will have to think about very carefully. The key, I think, is to find that balance between automation and personalization.
So chatbots can handle those, basic inquiries.
Mm-hmm.
But for anything complex or sensitive, human interaction is still crucial.
Yeah.
And it's not about replacing those interactions altogether, but using chatbots strategically.
Using them well.
Right. And they can even be designed to play a role in those employee well-being initiatives. So imagine a chatbot that, proactively checks in with an employee.
Yeah.
How are you doing? Provides personalized tips for managing stress, or even helps them, find mental health resources.
Okay, wow, that's a really cool application because you're right, then it's not just reactive, right? It's actually being proactive in supporting employee well-being.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so chatbots, lots of potential there.
Lots of potential.
What about employment relations and specifically collective bargaining? That feels like a whole other can of worms, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's a very complex area.
Yeah.
It's high stakes. And the article actually suggests that, AI tools, again, think ChatGPT, could be used by both employers and unions during those negotiations.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, for example, it could help research precedents or, draft arguments or even analyze data to support their positions.
That's crazy. Because it seems like it would actually level the playing field, in a sense, by giving both sides access to these super powerful tools.
It could. It could. But I think, a word of caution here. It's super important to make sure that these tools are used fairly and that they don't give one side an unfair advantage.
Okay.
Right. So transparency and responsible implementation, those are going to be key.
Yeah, absolutely. Transparency, fairness, you need that in any negotiation. So we've got employee relations, well-being, we've touched on collective bargaining. What's next?
So the article then dives into two other big areas of HRM. We've got talent management and performance management. And both of those are, really ripe for disruption by AI.
Okay. Let's get into it. Talent management is something that I'm always interested in. It just feels like companies are constantly struggling to find and keep good people.
Yeah, for sure.
So what can AI do?
So the article highlights AI's ability to, analyze those massive amounts of data. So it can identify potential candidates, predict their job performance, even personalize training programs, which is really interesting.
So you're telling me AI can sift through resumes, identify who the best person for the job is, and then even create a special training program just for them?
Yeah.
That seems like a lot of power, but I also immediately think, well, what about bias? Because if it's using data to make these decisions, what's to stop it from just perpetuating the biases that already exist?
Yeah, that's a really, really critical point. And the article does acknowledge that, these AI systems could potentially worsen existing bias if they're trained on biased data. So if the historical hiring data already reflect a preference for, certain demographics,
Yeah.
the AI could unknowingly just continue those patterns.
That's scary. So it's not as simple as just throwing AI at the problem. You really have to think about how these systems are designed and who's training them and who's monitoring them.
Exactly. And human oversight and ethical considerations are, I think, going to be paramount.
Yeah.
We can't just blindly trust these systems to be fair and impartial.
So it's really exciting, the possibilities in talent management, but you really have to proceed carefully with this commitment to fairness and inclusivity.
Yeah, 100%. And the same careful approach applies to performance management, which is the other area that the article dives into.
Okay, so are we talking robots conducting performance reviews?
Not quite robots, not yet.
Okay, good.
But they do suggest that AI could actually assist in performance reviews. So, by processing large amounts of data, identifying patterns, maybe even providing feedback to employees.
Okay, that's interesting. So like almost giving managers data and then they can use that data to give more like targeted data-driven feedback.
Exactly. But again, just a word of caution, the article really emphasizes that we need to be super careful about giving these AI systems too much control over performance evaluations.
Well, why is that?
Because AI systems can sometimes produce these really unexpected and potentially even harmful outputs.
Like what? Give me an example.
So, there was one case, for example, where a chatbot, in trying to offer helpful advice, actually tried to convince someone to leave their spouse.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's kind of bizarre.
It's creepy.
Yeah. So, it's a little groupy, but it just highlights the fact that these systems, as powerful as they are, they're still under development. And they can, make mistakes or have unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So I think the takeaway here is that human judgment and empathy, those are still absolutely indispensable.
Yeah.
AI can assist managers, but it can't replace them.
It can't replace the human.
Not yet.
All right, so everything we've talked about so far seems very U.S.-centric. What about the global implications of all this?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because the world of work is just becoming so interconnected, right? So it's really important to consider how these technologies will play out on a global scale. And actually, the article does dedicate a whole section to examining AI from this international human resource management perspective.
IHRM?
Yes, IHRM.
Okay. So what kinds of unique challenges and opportunities does AI present when you look at it through that lens?
So for starters, it revisits this idea of the productivity paradox. And I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. It's this idea that while these new technologies often promise increased productivity, they don't always deliver.
Right, like how email was supposed to make us so much more efficient, but now we all have 1,000 unread emails.
Exactly. So the article challenges us to consider, will generative AI actually lead to greater productivity? Or will implementing it just create, new challenges that offset those gains?
Right. So even if AI can automate tasks, analyze data super fast, it's not necessarily going to translate into the real world, right? There might be all these other consequences or complexities that we haven't even considered yet.
Yeah, totally. And it ties back to that historical perspective, right?
Yeah.
Have we always been right in predicting how technology will impact productivity? And, I think the authors argue that we need to be cautious, right? Think about those unintended consequences.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the hype of any new technology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the article also discusses the impact on something called the global war for talent, which basically refers to that, intense competition among companies and countries to attract and retain those really skilled workers.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a constant battle, right?
Yeah, definitely. So how could AI actually impact that?
Well, imagine, what if these AI-powered tools make it easier for companies to find and hire skilled workers from anywhere in the world, regardless of location,
Okay.
language barriers?
Yeah.
This could actually lever the playing field for companies in developing countries.
Oh, so they could potentially have access to a wider talent pool.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. It is.
Yeah.
But of course, there's a potential downside, right? So what if, skilled workers are lured away from certain countries? What happens to the economies they leave behind?
Oh, right. So it's not just about, benefiting the individual companies. It's also about considering the impact on, entire societies.
Yeah. And then, of course, there are those cultural considerations.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So often, AI systems are developed in one cultural context and then applied in another. And that can lead to misunderstandings or, unintended consequences.
Yeah, because culture plays such a huge role in, how we work and how we manage people, right? So it's got to be sensitive to those differences.
Yeah. And the article highlights how important it is to develop AI tools that are like culturally intelligent so they can understand and adapt to those different cultural norms and values.
So fascinating. It's like AI isn't just this tech thing. It's really interwoven with all these social and economic and even cultural factors. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, for sure. And the article doesn't stop there. It also explores how AI could intersect with two other critical areas, which are sustainable HRM and EDI, so equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Okay, those are big topics. I'm really interested to hear how AI might impact those areas.
Yeah.
So let's start with sustainable HRM. I mean, it's all about, integrating those economic, social, and environmental considerations into HR practices, right? So what role could AI play?
Yeah, so the article suggests that AI could actually be a really important tool for helping companies achieve their sustainability goals.
Like how? Give me an example.
So, for example, AI can be used to optimize energy consumption, in buildings or transportation systems.
Okay.
And that can significantly reduce a company's carbon footprint.
Makes sense. Using AI's power to analyze all that data and see patterns that we might miss.
Exactly. It can also be used to monitor supply chains. So to make sure that suppliers are adhering to, those ethical and sustainable practices.
Okay, so it's not just about what the company itself is doing. It's about holding, their whole network accountable.
Exactly. And it can also play a role in promoting that social sustainability within the workplace. So things like creating a more inclusive and diverse work environment.
Love that idea.
Yeah. So, we've talked about how AI can promote EDI, but it's really exciting to see how it can also contribute to those broader sustainability efforts.
Yeah, because ultimately it's all connected, right?
Totally.
Okay, so sustainable HRM, we see the potential. What about EDI? How can AI help us create more equitable and inclusive workplaces?
Yeah, so the article specifically looks at how AI could impact EDI and explores both the potential benefits and the potential dangers.
Okay, two sides to every coin, right? Let's start with the good stuff. How could AI actually promote EDI?
So one way is that it can help to identify and mitigate bias in those, recruitment and promotion processes.
Okay.
So for example, imagine an AI tool that can analyze those hiring patterns to see if certain groups are being underrepresented.
Oh, interesting. So it could help us actually see where those biases might be hiding that we don't even realize.
Yeah, exactly. And it could also be used to create those more inclusive onboarding experiences for diverse employees.
Yeah.
So, providing personalized information and resources.
Yeah, make everyone feel welcome.
Exactly. But as we've talked about before, there's always that other side. So, AI could also potentially perpetuate existing biases if it's not trained properly.
Right, because the data is key.
Exactly. So, if an AI is trained on data that already reflects those existing biases, then it could just continue to reinforce those patterns.
It's almost like this vicious cycle.
It is. And the article emphasizes the importance of those, algorithm designs and human oversight.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that the system is fair and doesn't have these unintended negative consequences.
So lots of potential, but again, you got to proceed with caution. Really think about these ethical implications.
100%. And the article finishes with this really fascinating section that explores how AI is actually changing the way we do research.
Oh, wow. So it's not just changing, the workplace, it's changing how we study the workplace.
Exactly. It's like this meta thing.
I love that.
So AI is now being used to assist with literature reviews, data analysis, even writing sections of research papers.
Wow. AI is a research assistant now.
It is. But again, ethical considerations here.
Right. What are the concerns?
So the article raises questions about authorship, transparency, the potential for AI to generate information that's misleading or even completely fabricated.
Oh, so it's not perfect. So it's how do we ensure accuracy and integrity if AI is actually writing part of our research papers?
Yeah, and the article emphasizes this idea of trust but verify. You can use AI as this research assistant, but researchers still need to critically evaluate the output.
Right. So don't just blindly accept it. You have to still use your own judgment and critical thinking skills.
Exactly. Even in this, increasingly AI-driven world.
So this article really covers a lot of ground, from these big picture business model changes to very specific things like performance management or recruitment, even to how research is being done. It's really amazing to see how AI is impacting all these different aspects of HRM.
It is. And I think that's what makes the article so great. It really presents this balanced and nuanced view, not just hyping up AI, but talking about those risks.
Absolutely. It's not about being for or against AI. It's about understanding its potential and its limitations so that we can use it well.
100%. And that understanding is going to be crucial for everyone involved. HR professionals, business leaders, policymakers, everyday employees. We all need to be thinking about this.
So we've covered so much, but I want to make sure that, we leave our listeners with some really key takeaways. What are kind of the main things that people should walk away from this conversation remembering?
Okay, so I think, first and foremost, generative AI, especially tools like ChatGPT, represent a really significant leap forward in technology.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking just about automation anymore. This is about AI creating new content and potentially reshaping entire industries.
Yeah.
Game changer.
Yeah, for sure. And second, the impact on HRM is going to be huge, and it's going to be multifaceted. So, it has the potential to really improve those HR processes, or, make things more efficient. It could promote well-being. It could promote EDI, but it also carries those risks of bias, job displacement, ethical dilemmas.
So it's not all good.
Not all good, no. We have to be proactive.
Okay.
And I think, the third takeaway is that human judgment, critical thinking, and ethical considerations are even more important now. So, we need to think carefully about how we design these systems, how we implement them, how we regulate them to make sure that they benefit everyone.
It's not about replacing humans with AI. It's about finding those ways for us to work together. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, what really struck me about this article was the importance of considering these contrasting viewpoints.
Yeah.
There's not going to be one right answer when it comes to AI.
Yeah, it's complex.
It's very complex.
There's a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different potential outcomes. So we need to be able to hold all of that, right?
Yeah. And I think that's what this article does so well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been so insightful, and I'm already my brain is going in a million directions.
I know.
I want to learn more.
Me too.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about.
Okay.
The article really focused on how AI is going to impact HRM, but I think it's worth asking, how might AI actually change the roles and responsibilities of HR professionals themselves?
Ooh, good question.
Right. So, will they need to develop new skills to work alongside AI? Will some jobs become obsolete? Will entirely new roles emerge?
Right. Yeah. What will the future of HR look like in this new AI world?
Yeah, what skills will they need? What kind of mindsets will they need to be successful? So many questions.
Yeah. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds.
Absolutely. And that's where we'll leave for now. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into generative AI and HRM, where we'll get even more into the specifics of how this technology is transforming the world of work.
So, kicking up right where we left off, I think the idea of HR evolving alongside AI is really key. We've talked about some of those big picture implications, but I think it would be helpful to zoom in on some practical examples.
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty. I want to hear how this is actually playing out in the real world. We talked a bit about recruitment, performance management, those kinds of things, but what are some of the specific ways AI is being used in, say, employee relations where, that human connection is so important?
It's interesting because employee relations, it's all about trust. It's about building relationships. But even in this area, AI is starting to make its mark. And I think one of the most interesting developments is the rise of chatbots.
Chatbots, right? I mean, we've all seen those little pop-up windows on websites and apps.
Exactly.
But how are they actually being used in HR?
So think about them. Almost like virtual assistants for employees. They can handle all kinds of those, basic tasks, like answering questions about benefits or company policies, providing guidance on procedures, all those things that HR departments get bombarded with.
Yeah. So it's like having an HR rep available 24/7, which could be super helpful for employees.
Yeah, exactly. And, it frees up time for those HR professionals to focus on those more strategic things. But the key, as we talked about before, is balance. Chatbots are great for those routine inquiries, but for those complex or sensitive issues, you really still need that human touch.
It's about using technology strategically, not just replacing humans altogether.
Right. And what's really cool is that these chatbots, they can actually be designed to play a role in those well-being initiatives we talked about. So imagine a chatbot that proactively checks in with employees, like, hey, how you doing? Offers tips for managing stress, work-life balance, even connects them with mental health resources.
That's a great idea, especially for employees who might be hesitant to, reach out to a person for help.
Exactly. Meeting employees where they are.
Okay, so chatbots, we see the potential there in employee relations and well-being. What about in the realm of employment relations and collective bargaining? That's a whole other ballgame, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong. That's a really complex area, high stakes, lots of potential for disruption. And the article suggests that AI tools like ChatGPT, again, could be used by both employers and unions.
Whoa, okay, now my mind is blown. How would that even work?
So imagine AI analyzing, mountains of data on past agreements, economic trends, even doing sentiment analysis on public opinion to help both sides kind of craft their positions.
So you're saying it could almost make negotiations more data-driven and less, prone to those emotional biases.
Exactly. But of course, there are concerns about fairness, transparency. It's not something we can just jump into blindly.
Right. So are we going to need a whole new set of rules for negotiating in an AI world?
We might. I mean, it's uncharted territory, but it's something we definitely have to think about.
Okay, so we've talked about chatbots in a lot of different contexts here, from well-being to those high-stakes negotiations. Let's move on to talent management. This is an area I think AI has the potential to be hugely impactful.
Oh, absolutely. Talent management, finding, attracting, developing, retaining the best people.
Yeah. How is AI changing the game?
Well, I think one of the most obvious ways is in recruitment. AI can sift through thousands of resumes in seconds, identify the candidates that are the best fit based on the job requirements, and even analyze online profiles, social media activity to get a more holistic picture of the person.
It sounds so efficient. I mean, think of the time and effort that could save recruiters. But, the question always comes back to bias. If these tools are trained on data that already reflects the biases in our workforce, then are they just going to keep perpetuating those biases, even if it's unintentional?
Right. And that's a huge concern. And, researchers and developers are working on ways to build these systems to be more transparent, accountable, and actually able to detect and try to mitigate that bias.
So it's not just about the technology, it's about the ethics behind it.
Exactly. And it's not just about how companies find talent, but how they develop it. Think about AI creating personalized learning experiences for employees, really tailored to their individual needs and learning styles.
So it could assess your skills, see where your gaps are, and then recommend courses or training materials just for you.
Exactly. And it could also help companies stay on top of, what skills are needed as technology changes so rapidly these days. It could help their employees stay relevant and competitive.
This is all so exciting. But I have to ask, what does this mean for the humans, for HR professionals? If AI is taking over so many of these tasks, what's left for them to do?
Right. It's a big question. And, the article touches on this. Some experts believe that, a lot of those routine HR tasks will be automated, which will free up HR professionals to focus on more strategic work. Things like building culture, fostering innovation, driving organizational change, those things that really require human judgment and creativity.
So it's not about replacing HR, it's about, helping them evolve.
Right, exactly. And it's also possible that we'll see entirely new roles emerge within HR. Things like AI ethics officers, people whose job it is to make sure that these systems are being used responsibly and ethically.
That makes sense. So the future of HR, it sounds like, is going to be this really interesting mix of human expertise and AI capabilities.
Yeah, it's this dynamic interplay between the two. It's going to be fascinating to see how that unfolds.
Okay. Let's talk more about performance management. I mean, we talked about AI's potential role in performance reviews, but I'm curious to hear more about how it could be used specifically to give feedback to employees.
Yeah. This is an area with lots of potential, but also one that requires a lot of caution, as we've been saying. I mean, remember the example we talked about, that chatbot that tried to tell someone to leave their spouse?
Oh my gosh, yes. That was a little creepy. So you're right. We have to be careful about what we give these systems control over.
Exactly. We don't want AI giving feedback that's insensitive or potentially harmful. The key is to use it as a tool to help human managers, not to replace them.
So how could AI be used in that feedback process without, crossing those ethical boundaries?
Well, for example, AI could analyze an employee's work, communications, even their collaborations, and provide insights to their manager about areas where they're doing well or areas where they might need some support. And then the manager can use that information to give more, personalized and data-driven feedback.
Okay, so it's taking all this data that we might not even be aware of and making it visible so we can be more effective in how we manage people.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, AI should never be the sole judge of performance. You still need human judgment, human empathy, especially when it comes to things like motivation and, those sensitive conversations.
So AI is a tool to inform those conversations, but ultimately the human is still calling the shots.
Right. It's about finding that balance between data and understanding.
This is all so fascinating. It seems like AI really does have the potential to change every aspect of HRM, but it's definitely not a magic bullet, right? It's a tool, and it needs to be used thoughtfully.
Yeah, well said. It's powerful, but we have to proceed with caution and really consider those ethical implications.
So let's shift gears now and talk about the global stage. We talked earlier about the potential impact of AI on the global war for talent. I want to dig a little deeper into how AI is shaping HRM practices in different cultures and countries.
Yeah, as the world of work becomes more interconnected, we really need to think about these global implications.
So, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities that AI presents from that international perspective?
Well, one of the big opportunities is, like we touched on before, the democratization of access to talent. AI can help companies find and hire skilled workers from anywhere in the world, breaking down those traditional barriers of location and language.
So you're saying it could open up opportunities for both companies and for workers in, developing countries that haven't historically had access to that global talent pool.
Yeah, exactly. Creating a more interconnected, more equitable global workforce.
That's so cool.
It is exciting. But of course, there are potential downsides, too. We've got to be aware of those.
Like what? What are some of the risks?
Well, one concern is what they call brain drain. So, if all those highly skilled workers are being lured away from developing countries to those more lucrative opportunities in, developed economies, that could have a negative impact.
Right. It could actually widen those existing inequalities. So it's not just about, benefiting companies and individuals. We have to think about those broader social and economic consequences as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, there's that need for cultural sensitivity in how we design and implement these systems. What works in one culture might not work in another. We can't just assume that AI systems developed in, say, the U.S. are going to translate seamlessly to other parts of the world.
Right, because culture has such a huge impact on how we work and how we relate to each other.
Right. So, for example, a performance management system that's designed for individualistic cultures might not work at all in a culture that's more collectivist.
So cultural intelligence is going to be even more important for HR professionals, right? Not just understanding different cultures, but being able to bridge those gaps.
Totally. Yeah, it's going to be a key skill. AI tools can help with some of that, like translation or even, cross-cultural communication. But ultimately, it's the humans who are going to have to build those relationships and foster that understanding.
This is a big challenge.
It is. And the article also talks about the potential impact of AI on things like labor regulations and worker rights. As AI transforms the nature of work, are existing labor laws still adequate?
Oh, good point. It's going to change so much about how we think about wages, working conditions, maybe even what it means to be employed in the first place.
Exactly. So, the article kind of throws this out there. Do we need to rethink some of those existing laws and regulations to adapt to this new world of work? It's a big question.
Yeah, big questions, but important ones.
Absolutely. It's something we have to start thinking about now.
So we've talked about how AI is impacting, that global war for talent, the need for cultural sensitivity, the potential implications for labor laws and worker rights. It's really hitting every aspect of HRM on a global scale.
It is. And I think what this article does so well is it doesn't try to simplify these issues. It acknowledges that complexity, talks about both the potential and the risks.
Yeah, and that balanced perspective is so important. We can't just get swept up in the hype.
Right. All right, let's shift gears a little bit now and talk about two other really important areas that the article explores: sustainable HRM and EDI equity, diversity, and inclusion. So let's start with sustainable HRM. How can AI help us create more, environmentally and socially responsible workplaces?
That's a topic I'm really interested in. I'm all ears. How can AI be a force for good in this area?
Well, the article points out several ways that AI can actually help companies achieve those sustainability goals. For example, optimizing energy consumption in buildings, reducing waste, even designing more eco-friendly products and packaging.
So again, using AI to analyze all that data that we might not be able to process as humans and find ways to be more sustainable.
Exactly. And it's not just about the environmental piece. AI can play a role in promoting social sustainability. Things like creating a more inclusive and diverse workplace, which we talked about. So it's really about using this technology to build a more sustainable world.
Yeah.
A world where everybody has the opportunity to thrive.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful vision.
It is.
Okay, let's talk specifically about EDI now. How can AI help us create those more equitable and inclusive workplaces?
The article talks about a number of ways that AI could be used in this area from, mitigating bias in recruitment, promoting those inclusive learning experiences, all those things we've touched on.
Yeah, we've talked about some of the possibilities. I'm really interested in that idea of mitigating bias, though.
It's such a crucial issue. I mean, bias can creep into every stage of the employee life cycle.
Yeah.
But AI can help us see it and address it, even in ways that we might not be aware of as humans.
Can you give me an example, like a concrete example, of how AI could actually be used to mitigate bias?
Sure. So imagine you have an AI tool that analyzes job descriptions, and it can flag language that might be subtly biased against, certain groups of candidates. So it might identify words or phrases that are gendered or that could discourage people from certain racial or ethnic backgrounds from applying.
Oh, wow. So it's helping us make our job postings more inclusive so we can attract a wider range of candidates.
Exactly. And it can also analyze those hiring patterns and see if there are areas where, certain groups are being underrepresented, and then companies can use that information to make their processes more fair.
So it's helping us identify those blind spots that we might have as humans.
Yeah, exactly. And, AI can also be used to personalize those learning experiences, what we talked about before, so that everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. It can provide real-time feedback and support, really, create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected.
It's amazing how much potential this technology has. But again, it really comes back to that idea of using it wisely, right? We have to be thoughtful about how we implement it, how we design these systems, how we use the data.
Absolutely. It's a powerful tool, but it's not a silver bullet.
Yeah.
It requires careful consideration and a real commitment to ethical principles.
This has been an incredible conversation. We've covered so much ground, from talent management to performance reviews to the global implications of AI to these really important issues of sustainability and EDI. It's mind-blowing to think about how much AI could potentially transform the world of work.
It really is a transformative time, and I'm excited to see what happens next.
Me too. But, as we embrace these new technologies, we have to remember that it's not just about the technology itself. It's about people. It's about creating workplaces that are both innovative and humane.
Absolutely. The future of work isn't just about efficiency and productivity. It's about creating a world where everybody can thrive.
Well said. Now, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked a lot about how AI will impact HRM, but what about the impact on HR professionals themselves? What are the skills and mindsets they'll need to thrive in this new world of work?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it's going to be a combination of, those technical skills, understanding AI and data, but also those human skills that are always going to be important, like empathy, communication, problem solving.
So it's not just about understanding the technology, it's about understanding how to use it effectively and ethically, right?
Exactly, finding that balance.
Well, stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive, where we'll explore some strategies for navigating the future of HRM in this exciting AI-driven world. Welcome back, everyone, to the final part of our deep dive on generative AI and HRM.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? I mean, just exploring the potential of this technology to, completely change how we work.
Absolutely. I mean, we've covered so much ground, from how AI is going to change talent management and performance reviews to the ethical implications of using it, not just in HR, but in research as well.
Yeah. We talked about the opportunities, the challenges, the potential benefits, the risks. It's a lot to take in, but I think the key is really to approach it with, both enthusiasm and caution.
That's really been a theme throughout our conversation, hasn't it? This idea that we need to be both excited about the possibilities and also really mindful of the potential pitfalls.
Definitely. And I think what struck me the most is just the sheer complexity of it all.
Yeah.
It's not a simple issue. It's not just, is AI good or bad? There are so many different potential outcomes, and it's going to take a lot of careful thought and collaboration to really navigate this new landscape.
Yeah, it's not black and white. It's this big, messy, gray area, which is why I think this last part of our conversation is so important. What are some practical strategies that people can actually use? How do we navigate the future of HRM in this AI-driven world?
That's a great question. And I think, if I had to pick one thing, it would be to embrace a mindset of continuous learning.
Hmm.
The field of AI is changing so rapidly,
Mm-hmm.
and HR professionals, they really need to stay ahead of the curve. That means being curious, exploring new technologies, being willing to experiment and try new things.
So it's not enough to just like read an article or go to a conference and then think, okay, I'm done. You have to be actively learning and engaging with this technology.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about creating that culture of innovation and experimentation within HR.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so mindset is important, but what about skills? What specific skills will HR professionals need to develop to be successful in this new world?
Well, I think it's going to be this really interesting blend of, what we traditionally think of as those technical skills, but also those human skills that are always going to be important. On the technical side, it's going to be helpful for HR professionals to have at least a basic understanding of AI concepts,
Mm-hmm.
data analysis,
Mm-hmm.
how these systems actually work. They don't need to become data scientists, but they need to be able to make sense of the data.
So data literacy is going to be key for HR professionals.
Absolutely.
Ah.
But at the same time, those human skills, things like empathy, communication, critical thinking, problem solving, those are going to be even more important in a world where AI is playing such a big role.
Yeah, because AI can't do everything.
Exactly. It can't
Yeah.
build relationships. It can't navigate those complex ethical dilemmas. It can't make those nuanced judgments that humans are so good at.
So it's really about finding that balance, right? Using AI to augment our capabilities, not to replace them.
100%. It's about creating workplaces that are both, high performing and human centered. I think that's where HR can really shine.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about implementation. For those HR leaders who are listening, who are maybe just starting to think about how to integrate AI into their organizations, what advice would you give them? Where do they even begin?
Well, I think the first and most important piece of advice is to start with a clear vision. What do you want to achieve with AI? Are you trying to improve efficiency, enhance employee experiences, promote diversity and inclusion? Once you have that vision, you can start to identify the specific AI tools that are going to help you get there.
So don't just adopt AI because it's the cool new thing, right? Have a plan.
Exactly. And don't try to do everything at once. Start small. Pick one area of HR, maybe it's recruitment, maybe it's performance management, and run a pilot project. See how it goes.
Start small, experiment, learn from those experiments, and then you can scale up from there.
Exactly. And, one thing I think a lot of people overlook is the importance of bringing your HR team along on this journey.
Mm-hmm.
Involve them from the beginning, get their input, address their concerns, make sure they feel empowered, not threatened by AI.
It's about making sure everyone feels comfortable and confident working with these new tools.
Totally. And lastly, be flexible. Be prepared to adapt and iterate because the field is constantly evolving. What works today might not work tomorrow.
So it's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And it's going to be an exciting one.
Well, this deep dive has been an absolute whirlwind of information, but in the best possible way. I've learned so much, and I feel like I have a much better understanding of not just what AI is, but how it's going to impact the future of work.
Me too. It's
Yeah.
been a really thought-provoking conversation. And I hope it's inspired our listeners to, keep learning and keep engaging with this topic.
Absolutely. And I think the key takeaway for me is that the future of work is being shaped right now.
Yeah.
And we all have a role to play in making sure it's a future that's both innovative and humane. We can embrace the power of AI, but we also have to hold on to our values, our commitment to creating workplaces where everyone can thrive.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
That's it for today's deep dive on generative AI and HRM. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the world around us.